Good morning, and you're now officially on the Save Our Sleep podcast.
Can't believe it. To say I'm nervous would be an understatement, but here we are.
So, podcast number one, what are we going to talk about? So, I thought with this podcast, and as we explained in the trailer earlier, or if you watched our trailer, there's a trailer about who Zoe is and why Zoe's here and why Zoe is doing the podcast with me. But so, as we discussed in the trailer, Zoe's good at asking questions. So I thought, what a better person. So as you will know, Zoe used to come into the hub with her little boys and she'd ask questions. And then we became friends. I'd leave her in the hub while I went and got a coffee and so on. And then Zoe and we just got on. But Zoe would ask questions. And I think that's really good because the book isn't really written by me. It's written by the publisher. And there's a lot of things which people don't understand about the book. So I thought, Zoe, podcast one, what we'll do is we'll basically just start at the beginning of the book and work through the book, but we'll add to it, and we'll put all the other detail that the publisher took out.
Yeah.
So the book was a hell of a lot longer and the publisher took a lot of detail out. So the first thing in the book, which I want to talk about, is mental health. So if you've got your books, it's probably a good idea to have the book. So the book is Save Our Sleep. And there's lots of different versions of Save Our Sleep. So this version is the latest version, and it's got this new edition written here. The version before this doesn't have the purple sticker. This comes down a bit. Maybe in one of the podcasts I'll bring the other versions. And up the top it says revised in text. And the original version doesn't have this, and it doesn't have the text up the top. You really want the most up-to-date book because it changes. I constantly change the book. But good idea, your homework is to get the book, and then you can have the book and you can come along to the podcast and know what we're talking about. So mental health. Why I say mental health, but in the book it says sleep deprivation, is because page one of the book, getting started, mental health. Now, especially with this whole COVID thing, we know how important our mental health is. Sleep is one of the main factors in mental health. If you get a good night's sleep, it's a really good building block, for having good mental health.
Of course. And in fact, this is how I came about your book in the first place. It was my mental health went down the drain when I was sleep deprived with the boys. They're about 5 months old. And I started suffering anxiety. And that's when I started reaching out to friends and other mums, and that's actually how I came about your book. So, perfect topic.
Walk.
I did.
You used to walk. I used to see Zoe walking all the time, and she wouldn't even stop to say hello because she was walking, trying to get the babies to sleep or keep them asleep. So mental health is so if you're not sleeping, your mental health suffers, but so does your babies. I've got really good sleepers. And they're really good learners. But this, parents always tell you this, they go to a sleepover at a friend's house. Now my kids are older now, they're 7, I better get this right, they're 7, 11 and 13. I may have it wrong, I don't know, I'm sure someone will correct me. I surround myself with children. So I've got Kieran, who's 7, I've got Ivy, who will turn 10 in a few weeks, but she is smaller, littler, weirder than Kieran. So people say to Kieran, Ivy is not mine. Ivy is a little girl who hangs out with us. She calls me her Friday mum. Ivy will go places and people will say to Kieran, give this to your little sister. And he goes, she's not little, she's littler, but she's older than me. But he actually never says she's not my sister, which is really sweet. So they class them nearly as sisters. So we've got Kieran, who's 7, Ivy, who's turning 10. We've got Killian, who is 12, I think.
You said 11 before.
Oh, he's 11. Yes, Ruby just turned 12. That's why I'm getting confused. So Killian is 11, and then Ruby is 12. Again, opposite in height, so people think Ruby comes first, and people will have seen them on my little YouTube videos and so on. And then Dara is 13. Yeah, so mental health, sleep. So if they go on a sleepover, they're cranky and they're in moods and they cry and they can't get anything done. You even see it in that age group. And then, so let's look when an adult suffers from sleep deprivation, like postnatal depression. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? So do these people who come to me who are so sleep deprived, are they suffering from postnatal depression, and then that causes the anxiety and that causes the sleep? And I'm not trying to pick postnatal depression apart. I'm just saying, there's postnatal depression, which comes from
hormones and etc.
And I'm not an expert on postnatal depression. But then you've got a sleep deprivation kind of
which is depression postnatal.
It's different. Yeah. And it's as soon as everyone's sleeping, that starts to disappear. So is that a preventable depression from postnatal? That's a really good way of looking at it, Yeah. So if you're not sleeping, it causes depression, short temper, guilt, mood swings, fatigue. I'm reading this from the book. Fatigue. That's not how it's said. That's French. I keep switching to French mode. Fatigue, because my dad's French. Okay. When I was reading the audiobook, I kept talking in French, and the guy kept saying to me,
Where's
stop.
That coming from?
I don't know. My parents talked French to me. Okay. My dad talked French, he's from Belgium, until my little brother died. So I have baby French. I have French from early childhood, and then it kind of disappears. Anyway, okay, it's not fatigue, it's fatigue. Okay, irritability, carelessness, mistakes, difficulty concentrating, slower reaction times, increased stress levels. Okay, so sleep. We need to sleep. Babies need to sleep. But if you don't sleep, you suffer from this type of depression and so on. Now, I remember clients who were so sleep deprived when I got to their house, because I used to go to people's homes. I remember someone describing it really well, right? She said, you're totally sleep deprived. I wanted to use a rude word, but I didn't. But she said, she used a rude word, but you're totally whatever. When you're making yourself a coffee and you put fabric softener in instead of milk. That is baby sleepless nights.
100%. I think we've all been there. Yeah. Found something, our keys in the fridge, or, yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we want to avoid. And that's one of the main reasons, for the podcast, is when your babies were born, they were in hospital. Did you sleep in the pregnancy? How did your pregnancy sleeping go?
Well, it was fine, because I only got to 25 weeks with that one. So, I was sleeping fine during pregnancy. Then the boys were in hospital for a good few months. And I slept fine then too, because they were in hospital and I was going home for a sleep, although waking 3 hours
You didn't go
express.
home. You were the same as me.
No, I went and stayed at an apartment, around the corner from the hospital. And then, I was flying as a new mum.
Were you getting up to express?
I was 3 hourly. That was great.
And you're calling that sleep. Are you crazy?
Look, compared to having a baby up in the night time for hours, it was easy. At the time I probably thought it was hard, but it wasn't until I got the boys home that I really truly discovered sleep deprivation. Yeah.
Because I remember with me, so we were similar. So the reason why Zoe and I sort of said to Zoe, you didn't go home, was because Zoe and I have got a couple of similarities. So we were living in Geelong. And when I was living in Ocean Grove, so further than you, so Zoe was living maybe, an hour from the hospital? Yep. And I was living probably an hour and 30 minutes from the hospital. So we didn't go home, we did the same. So when we had our babies, and especially Dara, who's my first that I brought home from hospital, we stayed in an apartment and I was expressing. But so I was getting up every 3 hours to express. But it's the same, you get up, you express, do you know that noise? Someone said to me once, is that a photocopier in the background? And I'm like, yes. I was on the phone, I think, to a radio interview, not the actual radio interview, but I was on the phone to going to do a radio interview, and I was on the phone doing the not the Zoom call, because they all really came about in COVID, but I was doing the pre-call, and I had the thing on, it's going, and you go, is that a photocopier in the background? I'm like, yeah, that's a photocopier. That's not the pump, that's a photocopier. Yeah, obviously wasn't a live radio interview, but yeah, so and so you get up, express, go back to bed.
It would, yeah.
Yeah, so it was probably easier to a certain degree, but then what happened when the boys came home?
Yeah, then all of a sudden you've got babies crying. So
they didn't come home together?
Well, no, you're right. I brought Sid home first and back to the apartment. So Sid was home for a month before we took Otto home. And yeah, so that was kind of easy because it was only one baby and he was still pretty sleepy at that stage. So again, waking up 3 hourly, I'd feed Sid on one side and Express the other side. And then we'd, get him ready like a day at work and take him into hospital. We'd spend the day in hospital with Otto.
And he was allowed back in, so probably you didn't do much because they would have wanted him clean. The clean babies, dirty babies. Have you heard them talking about that? So behind your back, they would have been calling Sid a not so clean baby. So a clean baby is, and this is my interpretation from hanging out in special care baby units and, and I think it's interesting. So a clean baby is where, I found this out because Kieran, who's now 7, he was in hospital and then I transferred him from Melbourne back to Geelong. But then he came out of hospital and then he went back into hospital, but he couldn't go into the baby unit because he was a dirty baby because he'd been out in the public. Okay. So a clean baby is a baby who's born, had no immunisations or anything, and then they're in the special care baby unit, NICU, wherever they are. But then, of course, you would have had this situation where you had Sid came home to the apartment, but Otto was there, but Sid could have got a bug and brought the bug in. So behind your back, midwives and stuff would have been like, keep an eye on that baby because they want him there, but he's not perfectly clean because he's not sterile, because he's not. And they weren't really washing his hands with the alcohol.
That would be these days with COVID. It'd be a completely different scenario. Would I be able to bring him in?
Did you have your own room for Sid at that point? Would they have isolated you?
They kept a cot. They kept Sid's cot next to Otto in his little.
Yeah, so he sort of was separate, and you weren't with the other babies. Yeah, so then we come down to, how do you avoid sleep deprivation? And this is something with babies. So with mums, get your baby sleeping, and that will help you avoid it. Yeah, but this is where it becomes a little bit confusing, and I can't really get my head around why people don't do the book or the routine from day one. I hear so many people say, I'm going to start the book when my baby's 2 months old, or I'm going to start the book when my baby's 6 weeks old. Something which always bugs me is, how come you can have women in the same hospital? Did you have the boys at the Royal Women's?
Yes.
Yeah. So I had my ultrasound and stuff at the Royal Women's, but then I was in Francis Perry upstairs, which is kind of the same hospital. It's just slightly different. So I think one's public versus private, but we wanted to be at the Royal Women's because it's got all the intensive care. And we'll talk about that when we talk more about the Prem section. But anyway, you can have the babies born in the same hospital. They're treated totally differently. So if you and I were mums of Prems, so when our babies are born, they take them from you. And I was always they and us and them and me. And it was really hard being Tizzie and a mum. I found that really difficult, really difficult. But they take your baby from you, and your baby goes in the NICU or then the baby special care baby unit. So the NICU is the neonatal intensive care unit. So Francis Perry Royal Women's has got a neonatal intensive care unit, and that's where the boys were and why the boys were there. Sometimes if they're really sick with more complications, they get moved to the Royal Children's, which also has a NICU. But did your boys ever go to the Royal Children's? You did so well. Zoe says 25 and a half weeks, and I say 25 weeks and 3 days, which is kind of the same thing, but she was 25 weeks and 3 days, did so well getting the boys that far and having such healthy babies, so healthy.
They were big and healthy, they
really
were.
So, but I had the opposite. I had like Dara at around, he grew to about 28 weeks, he came around the 30-week mark, he was supposed to come St. Patrick's, he was supposed to come around about now, he was supposed to come the 12th of March, and that was his due date, but he came the 31st of December, which is a real pain because, well, the good things are that Dara, up until about last year, always thought the fireworks on New Year's Eve were for his birthday. The bad news is, like swim teams and stuff, he's a year out. So he's always a year out from all his friends. So I kind of regret, I wish I didn't keep my legs crossed because he was an emergency C-section, but I wish I'd kept my legs crossed for an extra 26 minutes. If I'd kept him in there for an extra 26 minutes, he would have been a 2008 baby, and we wouldn't have all these issues with nippers and sports and swimming and with swimming, schooling. He doesn't even get to swim with his class. He has to swim with the year above him. And then we were always like, well, when the year above leave, because they all become year 7, you'll be swimming against yourself. And then COVID hit, and he didn't even get a chance to do that. Anyway, so you have him, and they take him away, and they take him to the special care baby unit. He didn't go to NICU, he went to the special care baby unit. And they put him on a routine. They keep him really warm. They could, they put him on his tummy, which was freaking me out. But yet, a mother having a baby on the same floor in the same hospital gets this baby and gets set up to fail. As far as I'm concerned, mothers with full-term babies born in the same hospital at the same time get set up to fail. And I say that because they get told...
Well, they get told different things from different nurses, for starters.
That always happened to me.
Yeah.
And we'll go back to that in 1 second. Yeah. But they get told, demand feed. Feed your baby when it cries. Yet how come you get told in special care and NICU, express every 3 hours? Then your milk's a really good, thick quality. I don't know if you got told that, but how often were you told to express?
3 hourly.
Okay. You get told, how often did you feed your babies?
3 hourly.
Why? Why do you get told different
I know, yeah.
to
that's an interesting point.
the mum who's just had a baby on the normal ward? Okay, that really, it annoys me. Then you're talking about the nurses. So these mums tell me, every time a midwife comes in, and let me just give an example from my point of view. And I think people want my point of view, and I'm not just banging on about myself, but I think this is why we're doing the podcast, because...
We want to know more. We want to know more than the book. We want to know about you and your experience, which is just plentiful. So, yeah.
So I've got Dara, and he's probably in an incubator at this point, and a couple of regrets. Everybody told me not to work. For mums out there, I regret that. A lot of people, especially having had COVID, and especially having worked from home, do what you want to do. Don't do what everybody tells you need to do. So I'd love to wind the clock back and do Dara again, but not be Tizzie Hall.
Sure.
Because I regret not working. I would go to the hospital in the morning. I would express, see Dara, and then while he slept, I'd sit there. And now I wish I'd worked, because what happened was I was told not to work. I was told, don't work, just enjoy this time, it's time with your baby. But because I am Tizzie Hall, and because I am the book, and because I am the website, and we're not as, came back after, and I had all this work to catch up on. And then I couldn't be with Dara, because once we did get out of hospital,
You really needed to, yeah.
I was trying to catch up on work. And that did cause some form of, not really depression, but just a hardship. And then going back to feeding, so again, I think I put way too much pressure on myself to breastfeed Dara. I was very ill. Wind the clock forward now. I had a ruptured bowel. We didn't know that. They thought I had preeclampsia. They thought I had toxemia. I lost my vision. I couldn't see properly. We now know, because since then we've opened me up and found out what was wrong. We'll talk about that in another podcast. But I was very ill. And I put so much pressure on myself to breastfeed. And it was like, I'm Tizzie Hall. I have to breastfeed. I have to prove that my breastfeeding advice works. I have to prove that my routines work. And I put myself under this crazy amount of pressure.
Yes.
And then I didn't know if the midwives knew I was Tizzie Hall. And then I didn't know if the midwives liked me or not. And I found that really difficult.
Sure.
And I'm really paranoid about whether people are on the hating side or on the nice side. I walk back to my car, like I'll go to my car today, there'll be a note in it. 10 notes are from fans. Every time I go back to my car, there's a note on it. There won't be today now that I've said it to Zoe, and one will be from a hater, but you think, oh, what's it going to be? I don't mind if people, we'll talk about haters or misinformed people, let's call them, but not now. We'll talk about them at some point. But back, to the special care nursery, is this midwife a pro Tizzie? Does she even know who Tizzie is? Is she misinformed? Has she read the book and she doesn't like it? That's a better position to be in. Read the book and don't like it, or don't just read the internet about the book. You know. So what would happen was, I'd be expressing and a midwife would come in and she'd go, "Oh my goodness, you've got like 2 litres of milk, stop." The more you express, the more milk you're going to produce. Dara's having 10 mils. You've got 2 litres there. And I'd say, "Oh, what am I supposed to do?" And the midwife would say, "Just express like 70 mils from each boob. And Dara's taking 10 and we'll freeze some for later." Yeah? So Nathan had to run out and buy a freezer. Then the next midwife would come in and I'd express 70 mils. And she'd say to me, "Your boobs are leaking." And I'd say, yeah, and she'd say, "Did you express them?" So not the next midwife, the next day. So each day the midwife changed. So you'd have one midwife, which really upset me, for one day. Because my paranoid Tizzie voice would think, that midwife's not looking after me because she realised I'm Tizzie Hall and she doesn't like the book. Yeah? And then, which is so silly when you look back at it, and then a different midwife would come in and she'd say, "You're leaking, like, you need to express till your boobs are empty, otherwise you're going to get mastitis." I never got mastitis. Lucky. Otherwise you're going to get mastitis. So then I'd spend that day emptying till I got, 2 litres out of each boob. Sure. And then the next day, a midwife would come in and go, "Okay." The other thing which really bugged me was, there was one midwife, and I don't want to name them because I don't remember all the names, but I remember their faces. And I want to call them all the same name. I want to call them all Lisa, but they weren't all Lisa, and they all had different names. But there were just some midwives. They were all fantastic. But there was one in particular, and she was probably the age I am now, then. Like, she was probably one of my 48 or something, and she was lovely. And she was there when I had Kieran as well, and I think when I had Killian. Yeah. But she could come in, and she could get Dara, and she could put Dara on the boob in the football hold, and he'd get on there and he'd drink. And it was really good, and you could feel him drinking, and it was so good. And then the next day I'd come in and I'd say to her, "Oh, excuse me, can you get down?" And she'd go, "I'm not looking after you today, love." And then I'd have this other midwife, and she'd be saying, "Oh, you need to use a nipple shield," and then we couldn't feed, and he wouldn't feed. And then the next day I'd have someone, and it was like every 4th day I'd have this midwife. And I went to them at one point and I said, "Why can't I have the same midwife who can get Dara feeding?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, because some people don't get on with their midwives, and it's our protocol to swap midwife every day."
Yeah.
And I found that really hard.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, with the nurses taking care of the boys. Really tricky because you create a rapport with someone and they get to know you and your child, and then you might not see them for weeks, and you might get someone that you don't quite agree with, or not feeling that nice vibe with, and it's stressful. And I get it. I understand how and why they do it like that. But it's
and so you'd not see them for weeks, but I'd see them at the next incubator, and I'd be going, no, that baby's formula bottle fed. You need to come help me. You're the boob expert. Get over here, boob expert. And they're like, "Oh, I can't," and then, so my first question is, why are mums out in the ward set up to fail, right? I want people to get the book and start the book from day one, because let's just picture full term. Let's pretend we had full term babies, right? Your next one, this one.
I'm pretending.
So Zoe's got, who I call Benno, in her belly, Benno in the belly. Am I allowed to call him Benno?
Well, you can if you want to, but you need to make it clear that that's not his name.
Okay, so I don't even know where it came from.
Wee little Benno.
Bump, Zoe's Bump, yeah. So it's good. We hope this one's going to be full term.
This one will be full term.
We hope we're going to do the podcast live now from the birth suite. So let's picture a full-term baby, yeah? So you've got a full-term baby, yeah? Why not? Okay, so if a baby is fed until they're full, so if you feed a baby breast milk or express breast milk, or breastfeed them, or formula feed them, however you choose to feed your baby, yeah? But if you feed your baby when it's first born, yeah? Why not feed the baby until it's full? Well, you can't feed them until it's full because your milk hasn't come in, so I'm not explaining it very well. But so we'll talk about that in a minute. But why not feed them Yeah, why not feed them till they're full, even if that means that you have to use some milk that you've expressed during your pregnancy, or you have to use a little bit of formula. Actually, that's a really good topic, and it's a real hidden topic, okay? Why are babies in special care if the mum's milk hasn't come in and the baby's sugars are low? They're given formula. And someone once told me, and I don't know if this is a fact, that babies who are given formula in that very first syringe are less likely to have allergies or milk intolerances and stuff. Someone needs to look into that for us. Okay. We'd love someone who knows about that to come on. If anyone's listening and understands that stuff, I'm not the expert in that. I'd love you to come on and explain that to us. And if it's even true, because it might not be true, okay? But I've noticed lately, and I actually put it on my Facebook support group. So we've got this Facebook support group, and I put it up there, and then everybody thought I was having a go at them, and I got all these private messages. So what happened was, there was a client of mine contacted me, and she actually had her second baby, and she wanted to use the routines from day one. And she contacted me because her baby was screaming, and her baby was hungry. And she wanted to give the baby some formula because her milk hadn't come in, and we did. And her husband was a pediatrician, and she also works in the medical area. And they wanted to give the baby formula because the baby was really hungry and crying. But the hospital wanted them to give the baby only express breast milk or breast milk, but the baby was really upset. Right. And she wanted me to say it was okay to give the baby formula, and I did, okay? So she gave the baby 20 mils of formula, and then the baby slept. And then this is in the hospital, and then she slept. And then her milk started coming in, right? And then the next day at about so after every feed, so I had her, and I felt bad about this. And I felt like I didn't want anyone to know it was Tizzie Hall's advice, because it comes back to the same thing where you need to breastfeed. And in Australia, breast is best. You need to breastfeed. You should only give breast milk. You shouldn't give formula. You should breastfeed. And I felt really guilty, and it's like this big, dark secret. Now, people do use my book, and they use my routines from day one, and their babies are happy on the routines from day one, and they don't have a problem with their milk, and their milk comes in as the baby needs it, and they just work together. And lots of people, like I would say 9 out of 10 of my clients, follow my book, follow the expressing advice, follow the pre-advice, and have no problems. But every so often, like 1 out of 10, the baby comes out really hungry, and the baby doesn't want to wait. Maybe if we looked at it, maybe they're babies who are overcooked, so maybe they come out more hungry.
Sure.
Okay.
So they're just individuals, and it's important that we know that every human is an individual, the mother and the child.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's going to be
that's why you're here.
Exceptions to the rule. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I want you here, because you're right. That's the words I'm looking for. Zoe, what Zoe's great at is, what you're great at is picking out the words that I'm not getting.
1 word every 10 words, but it's the one you need.
Well, you wanted me to teach you for this baby and do the podcast.
To do it this way. It's just, it's sensational. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this client, she's on the phone. We're giving the baby some formula. So the first day, she fed the baby on the boob. So I say, imagine your little finger. Now I'm teaching Zoe as well. I don't know if we've discussed this. So
teach me your ways.
I think you breastfed the boys. At least you breastfed one of them.
Yes, I breastfed Sid, and I did attempt to breastfeed Otto, but maybe the day before we took him home, I finally decided to...
And probably to get him home as well.
Yeah, there was a lot to it. So, we might go into that deeper in another podcast.
When we talk about prems, maybe. So, and again, I was saying I'd love to go back to Dara and see, because so with Dara, I breastfed Dara till Easter. So he was born New Year's Eve, and I breastfed him till Easter. And this comes down to depression and stuff. Like I went back to the original, what we're discussing, depression, sleep deprivation. So I breastfed Dara. No, I didn't breastfeed Dara. I gave him breast milk. So what happened was I would put Dara on the boob with a nipple shield for a little bit. He'd feed. Then I would top him up with a bottle of express breast milk, and he'd take maybe 100 mils.
Yeah, that's what we
Then I would sit and put him down, express 100 mils. Then I'd put him to bed. I didn't spend any time with him. I was feeding, expressing, putting him to bed. Feeding, expressing. Okay. Then we went away for Easter, and Nathan accidentally, through the breast pump, Nathan and Gavin Blue, we went away with Gavin Blue from Heartfelt and his fantastic organisation, and we'll talk about that again in another. We might even get Gavin on to talk about Heartfelt at some point. Anyway, so went away for Easter, expressing, feeding, whatever, I had bought a deep freeze to put all the express milk in. We had a full deep freeze of express milk. Here's a confession from Tizzie Hall. Full thing of express breast milk. I then went away for Easter, put the breast pump into a plastic bag, like a supermarket bag. Nathan put it in the bin. I made him drive the whole way back to where we'd stayed. By the time he got there, they'd emptied the bins, breast pump. I saw it as a sign from Kevin. We'll talk about Kevin in heaven again at another point. I saw it as a sign from Kevin in heaven to stop breastfeeding. Now, this is really interesting because I breastfed Killian and Kieran till nearly 2 years old. Dara, I went, that's a sign. I'm not breastfeeding anymore. I didn't give him the deep freeze full of express breast milk. Wow. I moved him to formula. Okay? Yep. I couldn't deal with it. I moved him to formula. And I reckon the day when he was, it was Easter. I don't know when Easter was that year, maybe 4 or 5 months old. I reckon the day I moved him to formula was the day I started enjoying being a mum. I reckon that changed it.
Sure. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Yeah, same thing. For me, it wasn't formula. I did finish the breast milk that I had stored up, but just moving to the bottle and just the relief and a happy baby, because some babies just take to bottles better.
Some babies can't breastfeed.
They just can't. And so, we need to treat that baby again as an individual and really listen to them.
But he was Sid's identical twin brother. Yes. How can one identical twin brother feed and one identical twin brother?
Yep.
Maybe it's boobs. But
they are different people.
Just going back slightly to this, to the mum in hospital. So we'll talk in the next episode about breastfeeding and before your milk comes in and so on. But let's just say for a minute back to this guilt and this formula. So this mum contacts me. So she's following my rule, and we'll talk about that in episode 2, about my rule of how to feed. She's following that. So she's putting the baby on for 3 minutes on each breast, and then she's giving the baby 20 mils of formula. The next day, she's doing like 3 minutes on each breast or whatever, or maybe it's gone up in time, and then she gives the baby. The baby was only taking 10 mils of formula. And then someone put this post up on the Save Our Sleep Facebook support group, and their baby was screaming, and everybody was saying, try this, try that, try the other. And all these mothers were in there. And I'm reading these posts going, why aren't you giving this mum it's okay to give your new baby a bit of formula before your milk comes in because your baby's starving. And then I put a post up in my really blunt, rude, because I'm like juggling a ball here and a ball here and a ball here and a ball here. And I'm trying to trying to help Dara with his maths homework, trying to do Killian's English homework, trying to do Kieran's words, and trying to help this mum in the Save Our Sleep support group whose baby's screaming. And I go in really blunt, like a bull in a china shop, and say, what's wrong with you all? Why are none of you actually telling this mum I didn't say what's wrong with you all. I said, I'd just like to say that there's a mum in here, and she's giving advice, and she's not telling you what she did. She did formula. What's wrong? Why are people not admitting the truth? And everybody in that thread, and they're my really good helpers, like you know the people who are fantastic in the Save Our Sleep support group, and every one of them thought I was having a go at them. So I got all these private messages, and I had to quickly go in and delete the post because it was like everybody thought, and it was like even people who I didn't know had given their baby a little bit of formula in the first few days, thought I was having a go at them.
Oh, wow.
And so it's much more common. But why do we all pretend it doesn't exist? It's not alcohol. It's not drugs.
No.
We're not doing a line of Charlie and accidentally put it on a podcast.
That's it, yeah.
It's feeding hungry babies. Why is it so secretive? So that's
a good question.
A good question. And
if anybody knows.
So episode 2, we're going to discuss the feeding, I don't know what we're going to discuss. We've only got to page 1 so far. We're going to be here
Doing
for
good.
352 episodes.
We are.
So we're going to call that a wrap for today on
Yeah.
episode 1, because I want to take a question, because we've asked
yes.
clients for a question, and we've got a question from Grace. But so this is episode 1. Each episode, we're just going to see what happens, and we'd love your feedback. Now, we'd love you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we're going to have this. Here's a confession, Zoe. They've recorded this. We're going to put this up. It's not just going to be a voice.
Okay. Thanks.
So you're going to be able to watch it. So hence your coffee cup, and I don't have one. No.
Lucky I brought my fancy
and her
cup.
laptop. But
Okay.
we're going to have it on YouTube, so subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yes, please do.
We're going to have it on all the different podcast platforms, I hope. Yep. So whatever podcast... Now, if it's not on your podcast platform, tell us. Not
Okay.
yours.
Okay.
The clients, the readers, the fans,
let
the
us know.
friends. And the uninformed. We're not calling them trolls. Uninformed, right? So, let us know.